My name is Charles Ukeje. Until recently, I spent 2 years at the Institute for Peace and Security Studies at Addis Ababa University. I was managing the Executive Master's Program in Peace and Security in Africa, which is a program of the African Union in collaboration with Addis Ababa University to build capacity of staffs of the African Union as well as RECs and other civil society institutions, multilateral institutions that work on peace and security issues. I think the first point is to ask ourselves what are the provisions of the ACDEG, the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, and there are several of them. I mean, you only need to look at the principles, as contained in the Charter itself, and it covers everything from the political to the economic, to security issues and so on and so forth. Questions of corruption, questions of access to political space. And you would agree with me that as people in power undermine the spaces, as they make it increasingly difficult for African citizens to access the space, to be visible within the space, and to make an impact within the space, then you begin to see why we experience some of the security challenges that we face. And a very good example of that, of course, would be, just by way of example, the nexus between election-related challenges and insecurity in many of our countries. In the period just before elections, during elections and after, you could see the kind of insecurity that prevails. And depending on how election results go, it will either be a small storm in the teacup or big conflagration. So I think that the provisions of the African Charter in several different respects resonate with and speak to the challenges of insecurity. If we continue to ignore those issues of access, issues of representation, issues around corruption, issues around lack of access to subsidized socioeconomic opportunities for African citizens. For as long as we continue to, have those challenges, then peace and security will be threatened. And if peace and security of citizens are threatened, if people are threatened in such a way, it's very likely that they would they will push to the wall, come back. And we're beginning to see this resonate across board from Casablanca to the Cape. I think one of the most important ones, and there are many, and I probably should just pick to one, is a question around unconstitutional change of government. The Charter is very clear about unconstitutional change of government, zero tolerance for unconstitutional change of government. And I think that if you look at our different regional institutions, they have also embraced elements of this. ECOWAS, for instance, the region where I come from, has a charter on democracy, similar kind of charter, which is completely says it has zero tolerance for such undemocratic practices. I think that it is probably one of those provisions that most threaten peace and security today. Why incumbent governments would like to manipulate elections to favor them, how they would, even before elections, try to engage in a kind of political gerrymandering, how they would try to amend the constitution, how they will try to make it difficult for opposition to thrive, how they will muffle civil society, how they would make it impossible for citizens to express themselves and so on and so forth. And we're beginning to see that side by side with this trend is the demonstration of the authoritarian excesses of the state. And as the state becomes more authoritarian, more and more authoritarian, we know that threat to peace and security becomes higher. It's very unfortunate that the African state that should be the custodian, of all those elements that should promote peace and security is by itself rather the biggest culprit in this regard. I think there are three key stakeholders that are the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance identified. The first one is the state parties themselves, member states, states that have ascended to the charter, endorsed the charter and ratified it. Like I said earlier, no matter how difficult, no matter how bad the post-colonial state in Africa is, and people have used several different names, to qualify the post-colonial state in Africa. But the truth is that, as bad as the state is, in my view, it is probably still the only force, the only center that is capable of bringing everyone together. So while the state, the post-colonial state in Africa, state parties to the charter, might be facing a lot of challenges, centrifugal challenges, challenges pulling it apart in different directions, ethnic challenges, religious challenges, and so on and so forth. I still think that it provides an umbrella, okay, even if it's one that still leaks for now, but one that can be mended. It provides an umbrella that member states that can actually help to promote the charter. But beyond the state, you of course have RECs, the regional economic communities, and then of course you have the African Union. I think that a lot of issues, between these three stakeholders, the problem really partly is who takes the lead on certain issues. You can see the bickering between the RECs and the AU from time to time. You can see the standoff between member states and the RECs, and between member states and the African Union from time to time. I think that it is only when each of these stakeholders, can forge a common ground. It's only then that we can say that we'll be having a charter, that can live up to expectations. Other than that, for as long as they talk past each other in some dialogue of 2-3 depths, I don't think much progress will be made. I think it's important for us to bear in mind that if you look at the political landscape in Africa over the last, say, 20 years, a lot has changed. And we should not delude ourselves. And I know that there are people who are very critical about the change, but there might not be changes that have brought total relief. But I don't think that anyone on the continent would pray for the kind of status quo that existed in the late 80s and 90s, where we had military rules, military regimes, and autocratic one-party states, and so on and so forth. So the political landscape, if you put the political map of Africa in the early periods and vis-a-vis the political map of the continent today, you will see that it's substantially different. Whether this difference now reflects in the lives of the citizens, is a completely different thing entirely. And what I would like to see is implementation of provisions of the charter that will have meaningful impact on the citizens of Africa across board. Okay, this is what I would like to see. And I don't think that is impossible. You could see now, for instance, the number of countries that are saying, oh, we welcome our African brothers and sisters who can always take visas at the point of entry. Okay? Yes, so at the same time that people are making an argument that we need a complete visa-free Africa, okay? But we can see modest progress, in this regard. So it might take a long time, but one step at a time. So I see that, I think that if we remain faithful, either as African citizens, in terms of holding our governments to account, or state parties to the charter, or regional economic community or communities, or the African Union, if we remain faithful to some of the key provisions of the African Charter, I think that it's going to be better off for everyone. Not remaining faithful to those principles will actually come at a cost, and I think the cost is growing. I'll just give you one. I think that in terms of the biggest impact is in terms of norms creation, norms building. Whether we have norms implementation is a completely different question. But the fact that AGA, the African Governance Architecture, has put governance at the center of this discourse, has put it at the front burner of debate, okay, is a major progress. And I think that not many people will imagine that it's already 5 years old, okay? And for an initiative that is just 5 years old, I think that the fact that a lot of Africans, consciousness about even the name, you know, and increasingly the provisions, some of the things that it believes in, some of the basis for which it was established, okay, the fact that consciousness is growing around it is a major plus for it. But now, beyond 5 years, it has to begin to move, not just to deepen the consciousness, but to move beyond the consciousness, you know, to action, to more action, you know, to ascertain itself. But I think to the extent to which it's been able to create a basis for consciousness around norms of governance, around norms of politics, you know, around norms about how certain things should be done within the political space, is a major plus for the institution, and I can only wish it well beyond 5 years.